Yes, we should resolve everything as quickly as we can, but sometimes things can't be resolved, and resolution isn't always best. The highest law is love, and so sometimes the best thing is to leave it alone. So Abraham, phlegmatic, primary issue is fear and trust. Isaac, phlegmatic, struggles with the same sin as his father. The exact same thing. When the pressure's on, when the threat is present, he goes to fear. Fear, cover it, hide it, lie. And by the time you see this in the third generation, we're going to study it a lot more next time. By the time you see where this goes in the third generation, these chains are so strong that Jacob is not even phlegmatic, but because it's so ingrained in deception to avoid pain, deception to advance my pleasure, deception for no reason. What are you lying for? It's what I do. It's what I always do. It was in my family. It's what my dad was a liar. My grandpa was a liar. And when we get under pressure, we lie. She's my sister. We lie to get out of what's on us. That's generational sin. And now I want to just talk about generational sin for a minute, and I want you to keep your finger in Genesis. We will come right back there, but I'm going to say something strong to you. I love you, and I'm going to say something strong to you now, and so I want to make really clear that you see it in the Bible. So turn with me to the last book in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. So that would be Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, say it. Deuteronomy, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 24. And there, Deuteronomy 24, and I want to show you in verse 16. God is expanding our understanding of the law, and he says this: fathers shall not be put to death because of their children, nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers. Each one shall be put to death for their own sin. Now, what that's teaching is no matter what your kids do, God will not punish you for what your kids do. No matter what your dad did, God's not going to punish you for what your dad did. All right, men? And ladies, no matter what your children do or become, God will not punish you for what your children do or choose to do. And furthermore, God will not punish you, ladies, because of what your parents did to you or because of you. God will not judge you because of these things. Isn't that good news? You say, well, but how does that square with generational sin? All right, back to the beginning of Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 5. And notice that Deuteronomy 5, God is laying out the law again, and he's called all the people of Israel together, and God speaks to the people through Moses. I am the Lord your God, Deuteronomy 5:6. You shall have no other gods before me, verse 7. No carved images, verse 8. Why? Here it is, verse 9. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. You say, well, isn't jealousy a sin? Jealousy is wanting what isn't yours. So, what isn't God's? Hold up the universal symbol for what isn't God's. Therefore, with God, jealousy is not a sin. He wants what's his, and he wants our hearts. And so when he says, I'm jealous, it's really a very holy, holy thing. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on their children to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me. You say, well, which is it, James? I mean, which is it? Either the father, the son is punished for the father, or he isn't. And now we have a verse that's saying that he visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the sons to the 3rd and 4th generation. And we have a scripture in the same book in the Bible that says that he doesn't punish us for our father's sin. Which is it? Come on, Bible students, tell me, which is it? It's both. It's both. God does not judge us. There are no consequences, is key. There are no consequences for generational sin. but there are inclinations. And because of how your father or mother or grandfather struggled, because of sin in your family's past, you have inclinations, you have temptations, you have susceptibilities, you have vulnerabilities. And you have to recognize, if we're going to think differently, we have to do some thinking and reflecting upon what was my father, what was my mother, what were my grandparents, where were they coming from? For some of you, they didn't even know the Lord. How many people have parents that did not, at least at some point, know the Lord? Obviously, grandparents, hold up your hands. All right, so what were they into? And what was their life about? Because know this, their inclinations, their temptations, their susceptibilities, their vulnerabilities will visit themselves upon your life. Now, good news, greater is He who is in us than he who is in the world, and God's power is more than sufficient for this. But if we're going to think differently, then we're going to think aware. And, you know, my mom really battled depression, and I just really find that a correct patterns of thinking formed over a long period of time. Now, if you're ready for some good news, say good news. Because if you look at the next verse in Deuteronomy chapter 5, here's the grace. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. You say, but I don't hate God. Right, verse 10. But showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Amen? And I want to follow God, and I want to honor God, and I want to break the chains of generational sin in my family, and I want to do everything I can as long as I'm drawing breath to make sure that I get victory over some things so that my kids don't struggle with the things that I struggled with, so that my grandkids, when I'm off this earth, are not battling things that I wouldn't let God get me victory over. So what are those strongholds? Maybe in your family there's a stronghold. I would just call the general category crutches. Crutches. We turn to substance. We don't turn to God. We turn to alcohol. We turn to, smoking pot, other kinds of medication that inebriate my ability to feel pain. And because it blocks the pain, it blocks the God-given thing to get me to a better place. And so, substance abuse, materialism. Maybe you grew up in a family where everything was about the next thing, and we're going to get one of these, and we're going to buy it, and we're going to own it, we're going to polish it, and we're going to enjoy it, and this is our life. Don't you ever touch my boat. Who scratched my boat? If you grew up with that, my stuff, okay, that can become a real stronghold for people. And as I often say, it's not wrong to have a thing, but if that thing has you, that's a threat to God, and it will be taken out. And so we want that stronghold broken. Maybe the stronghold of gluttony. Maybe you grew up in a home where the amount of food that was served at the table was 3 times what was needed. And you had someone whose identity was cooking. Their identity was tied up in seeing you enjoy that. And they're like, have more, have more, have more. And everyone in your family has always battled obesity because food had a place that it wasn't supposed to have. And it has a stronghold. It's a stronghold. It's just, as hard as I try, it has me. And so that can be generational sin or lust. Clear category. Selfishness. We just do what's best for us. We just do what's best for us. Just the people at this house. We don't serve anyone. We don't give ourselves to anyone. And that's I love you. That's a stronghold. And your life isn't better for that. Okay? And so, all in favor of thinking differently? Okay, not an easy message to give. Trust me on that. Not an easy message to hear. But thankful for our capacity to speak truth to one another in love. And we're destroying the strongholds of family dysfunction. Number 1, generational sin strongholds. Pray about that. Think about that. Journal about your family. Talk to your parents if they're still living and ask them about these things. And then this conflict resolution strongholds. Back to Genesis now for the rest of the message. Genesis 26 is where we're looking at Jacob's home of origin. Watch what happens here. This is something. We're going to talk about conflict resolution strongholds. Now, in our temperaments or our dispositions from last week, how many people, just two broad categories, how many people are extroverts? Hands up, extroverts. Okay, hands up, introverts. Okay, so extroverts tend toward fight. There's going to be conflict. We're going to fight it out. Want to do it here? Want to do it outside? Want to do it with words? How do you want to do this? And then introverts tend toward flight. These are broad categories. And because I had asked people, did you grow up in a fight home or did you grow up in a flight home? Well, the reality is that many of you, of us, grew up in a home with one of each. And we had a mother or a father who would fight it out. Let's do this, argue now. And another person who was the opposite attract of that, who was, let's smooth it over, just make everything okay, and we'll deal with it later, or maybe it won't need to be dealt with at all. And believe me when I tell you that home of origin issue, how conflict was dealt with, can become a massive stronghold in the lives of God's people. The problem is that we always want to do what we do naturally and easily. We always want to do the thing that comes to us. The stronghold is always wanting to handle it the way that I do.
It's the way your parents did things, the environment in which you were raised. Mom spoke harshly. Dad battled lust. Your grandparents struggled with selfishness. Whether you see it or not, your family's pattern of behavior is impacting your thought life. Because of watching them and growing up with them, you're inclined to behave just like them, for better or for worse. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can change the way you live by changing the way you think.
If we're going to think differently, we have to be willing to talk about the strongholds of family dysfunction. It's just ways that you've been thinking for so long, you hardly even realize you're doing it. But it's the way your parents did it. It's what their parents maybe did. And we need to see those chains broken.
If you're ready to break free from your old way of thinking, we'd love to send you our brand new resource, Think Differently: How to Change Your Mind. Filled with principles from God's Word that have greatly impacted Pastor James's own life, this study guide will teach you how to destroy the harmful thought patterns that lead to bad behavior. Request your copy when you support this ministry with any amount, and get ready to experience new joy and victory in all areas of life. And for a gift of $85 or more, we'll also send you the entire Think Differently series on DVD. It's not about trying harder. It's about getting the right mindset that produces long-lasting transformation. This series will help you do just that, equipping you to approach life with the mind of Christ. Request this series today and see for yourself how better living starts with better thinking. Just call 800-545-6800 or go online to jamesmacdonald.tv.
So let's see it here. Genesis 26, starting in verse 12, Isaac, remember he's the son of promise, the miracle baby, and Isaac is older now, he's married, he has his own children, and he sowed in that land and reaped. He's not really living where God wanted him to live. He's living in Gerar, and the Philistine nation, which they're just, a problem right up until the life of David and beyond, enemies of God. And Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. Wow. And the Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks, and there's no money, so his wealth was measured in flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. This is a problem. Now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham, his father. That's really bad. You can go to the tap and get a cup of water anytime you want one, and one of the problems is that you sit in church and you can start to feel really thirsty. Many of you don't have something to drink. And if that creates a feeling of thirst in you, then think about the wilderness land in Israel and the hot sun and no access to fresh water. You've got salt water in the Dead Sea, salt water in the Mediterranean Sea. And so they would dig these wells down 20, 30, 40, not with a backhoe. They would dig these wells down by hand. And they would get so low that they were into the rock strata, and then the water would seep in from the rocks and fill the well. This was a massive undertaking, and the digging of every one of Abraham's well and the spiritual name that he gave to it and the worship that he offered to God there was a massively sacred thing. So imagine if your dad had dug all these wells in the land that God gave him, and you're the bigger and more powerful person, and your enemies that have already told you they're afraid of you come and start filling in your wells. How many men here think they'd be able to handle that? They would know what to do. Well, watch what he does, because see it here in the text? And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, you are much mightier than we are." Verse 16. So Isaac departed from there. You want me to leave? I'll leave. Where do you want me to go? Tell me where you want me to go. I'll go there. So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water's ours." And water was like a currency, so he called the name of the well Ezek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that also. So he called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well. They didn't quarrel over it, so he called its name Rehoboth, saying, "For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful and dwell in the land." From there he went up to Beersheba, and now he's back in God's country. And the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, "I'm the God." What does God think about all this, what he's doing? What does God think about all of this? Dig a well. Hey, that's our well. Okay, no problem, no problem, no problem. And you dig another well, and they're like, "That's our well too." "Oh, no problem, no problem. It's all good, it's all good." Sometimes flight is the right thing. Sometimes engagement, fight. We have to have some conflict, let's have it. Let's just have it in a healthy way. How many people would agree that sometimes you need both? Do you agree with that? All right. So if sometimes you need both, my point here isn't that he was wrong in every instance to avoid the conflict. My point here is his wrongness is in the fact that that is all he does. He just runs from conflict. That's his stronghold. And it's the same thing based in fear, phlegmatic's fear. And so he's making his decisions based upon that stronghold. And if you want to know what God thinks about it, he appears to him, verse 24, and he said, "I am the God of Abraham, your father. Fear not." Remember we studied God has not given us a spirit of fear. God doesn't want his children living in fear. And yet that's such a huge stronghold. And my point in this message is not to preach a message on fear. My point is to preach a message on strongholds. So whatever is your way of dealing with conflict, please make a note of this. The stronghold is the one-size-fits-all approach to conflict resolution. That's the problem. The problem is that we always want to do what we do naturally and easily. We always want to do the thing that comes to us. The stronghold is always wanting to handle it the way that I do. I'm a fighter, not a flighter. Is that a newsflash? Newsflash, newsflash. A few years ago, I preached a sermon called "Always Resolve Everything Now." I wouldn't preach that series again, not like that, because I don't believe that anymore. I now see that as more reflective of my disposition. And yes, we should resolve everything as quickly as we can. But sometimes things can't be resolved, and resolution isn't always best. The highest law is love. And so sometimes the best thing is to leave it alone. Sometimes, I just wrote down some questions that could be answered. What if the other person isn't ready? What if it's better left alone for now? What if you need more time to see your own fault in the problem? What if waiting and praying and learning and loving sets the stage for a better resolution down the road? I would say always resolve everything now as much as you can without violating the law of love, but that's too long of a title, so I'll have to work something else up. But do you see? Do you get it? So the stronghold is, and it's true on the other side too. Some of you were not taught to fight. Some of you, the predominant theme in your home was flight. And that reminds me of what I used to always say: if you can't pick the fruit, don't bruise it. If you can't pick the fruit, don't bruise it. And I believe that too. But I believe that what if inaction causes greater danger? What if doing nothing, leaving it alone, makes it worse? Or what if doing nothing communicates that I don't care? What if they're doing the same thing to other people that they did to you? Love would compel me to action at that point. And what I'm trying to the best of my ability to make clear is that there is no one size fits all. And the stronghold is, I always do this under pressure. This is how I get out of it. I fight and end it. I run and hide. And the stronghold is not being present in the moment with the God who says, fear not, and wisely discerning what is needed today in that situation, and the need may change from day to day. And we can walk with God today and trust God today for the wisdom to think differently and do what the situation warrants, that represents His heart to love and advance His purposes for reconciliation. Clear?
So I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. I don't know how to say it. I'm quite a bit younger than you, right?
As a son should be to a father.
So, okay. So I don't yet see all of the generational patterns that I know that you can see, but I know that I will see them. So when did that start clicking for you?
Well, I think you start to see the generational patterns. You know, I struggled with my parents, struggled as you start to go through things that you're old enough to remember them going through.
Yeah.
So now that you have a baby,
yeah.
All right, you can begin to imagine what it was like when you were our little baby.
Yeah.
And then as your son grows, you'll be like, oh, well, I actually remember when my parents brought me to junior high school. Now I'm bringing my kids. Wow. And as you start to go through things that you're old enough to remember, when you were the child and not the parent, when you were the employee and not the boss, when, you know, and so on and so on. And it's funny, I like to tease Kathy, and she doesn't love this, but her mother is so amazing. I talked to her on the phone this morning, but I'll say, I married your mother, and I'll tease her about it. And really, it's kind of an endearing thing. But the reality is I hear myself sometimes saying things, I'm like, that sounds like my dad. And so you begin to recognize that there are patterns in our lives, there are patterns in your life from your family. There are ways of gaining victory. There are ways of struggling and stumbling that are unique to you because of the family that you come from. And this isn't to beat down your family. We're to live in forgiveness. This is to recognize the stronghold and its source and take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ.
Amen. And instead of thinking about the ways we wish things were different, let's have different and victory in the future, right?
Yeah.
And so we have these resources for you. Watch this.
It's the way your parents did things, the environment in which you were raised. Mom spoke harshly. Dad battled lust. Your grandparents struggled with selfishness. Whether you see it or not, your family's pattern of behavior is impacting your thought life. Because of watching them and growing up with them, you're inclined to behave just like them, for better or for worse. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can change the way you live by changing the way you think.
If we're going to think differently, we have to be willing to talk about the strongholds of family dysfunction. It's just ways that you've been thinking for so long, you hardly even realize you're doing it, but it's the way your parents did it, it's what their parents maybe did, and we need to see those chains broken.
If you're ready to break free from your old way of thinking, we'd love to send you our brand new resource, Think Differently: How to Change Your Mind. Filled with principles from God's Word that have greatly impacted Pastor James's own life, this study guide will teach you how to destroy the harmful thought patterns that lead to bad behavior. Request your copy when you support this ministry with any amount, and get ready to experience new joy and victory in all areas of life. And for a gift of $85 or more, we'll also send you the entire Think Differently series on DVD. It's not about trying harder. It's about getting the right mindset that produces long-lasting transformation. This series will help you do just that, equipping you to approach life with the mind of Christ. Request this series today and see for yourself how better living starts with better thinking. Just call 800-545-6800 or go online to jamesmacdonald.tv.
God has given Pastor James the ability to unpack the Word in such a powerful way. So whether it's a word of encouragement or a word of conviction, God has a way of speaking to me wherever I'm at.
He holds us accountable in a way. I mean, he doesn't know me personally. He's not calling me and telling me to get in the Word, but I do know how important that is after sitting under his teaching. It's made me a better mom, a better friend, a better sister.
Pastor James speaks the Bible. You know, he doesn't beat around bushes. He just says it like it is, and I respect him, and he's an awesome man of God.
Well, Anthony, I always love to have your mother in the studio with us.
Yes, we do. And Mom, I remember when I was a kid, one of the things I loved about you is you're always writing notes to people, writing thank you notes to people. Is there anybody that you want to thank today?
Yes, there is a team of people that help with this, and they're not all